Hi guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here, and today I am going to be doing a Let's Fix It tutorial where I take one of my old designs that I made a few years ago and we are going to improve it. So this one I already like quite a bit, but the finishing wasn't to my liking. So this is basically what we're going to be making today, but a more finished version of it. So what you're going to need are Primo bronze and Primo copper rolled out on the third setting of your butter machine, which is about, I'd say about 2mm thick for me. And then you're going to need to have mixed up your colour recipe, which is 2 equal parts black to 1 part burnt umber. So you can just take a cutter, any cutter you want, just use the same cutter and cut out 2 black and then 1 burnt umber, and then mix that together and you'll get this colour recipe. And again, that's also rolled out on my third setting. So those are the colours you're going to be needing for this project. So we're going to put this aside for the moment. We do not need it right now. And what I am going to do is I'm going to bring over a plain piece of printing paper. And I just want to burnish this one and this one quickly, just so that they're nice and smooth before we move on to putting them together. And it'll be very quick to just smooth them over. This will get rid of any roller lines, fingerprints, things like that. Okay. Here we go, and you can see how they're much nicer and smoother. And then I think I'm going to start with this one. So I'm actually going to work with it on my tile. And I'm using a ceramic tile. And just burnish your clay onto your tile. And then what I want you to do is I want you to cut it into sections like so. Okay. Then just trim away this excess. Okay, then pick that up and put it to the side. I generally will just have it sitting on a piece of printing paper that we used just a moment ago. And I will repeat with my copper piece. Quickly burnish that onto your tile and then cut that into some triangular shapes. Okay, so we've got these to work with now, and so we're going to move on to the next step. Now I'm just going to put this to the side, out of the way, and I'm going to bring over another piece of printing paper, same one that we used to burnish earlier, and I'll just bring this here so you can see that, yes, and I will just take pieces, split them off. And then just piece them together like so. And just continue doing that until you have a nice sheet, and when that's done we can cut it. We are going to actually texture it first, and then we can move on to cutting out our piece. Okay, and there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very light burnish in the direction of our strips. And I'm just doing a very light burnish, not too hard, because we want to texture this, so I don't need to burnish that hard. I'm just sticking the pieces together a bit, essentially. Okay, then bring over a texture such as sandpaper. I'm going to be using this aquarium filter sponge. And our trick here is to be very gentle when you're texturing. Don't use a roller to do it because you will end up distorting your pieces. Just go in with your fingers and very gently but firmly press in that texture. like so. So trying not to distort those lines. Okay, let's peel that up, and there we go. I'm not sure if you can see it that well. If I twist it around, you can see it's quite pretty the way it looks. So I don't want to over texture it. So what we're going to do now is we are going to cut out our shape, and I'm going to be playing around with a freehand shape. As you can see, this is kind of freehand. I don't have a cutter for it, so play around. If you're not comfortable just cutting straight on here, you can always draw a shape on a piece of paper, cut out that piece of paper and use it as a template. That's something that you can do, but I'm going to be just doing it straight on the clay slab. Okay. So to make sure that I get a nice even curve every time, I'm going to be working with one of my plastic blades, and they're pretty sharp. They're not as sharp as the metal ones, but they work really well when you're trying to keep a nice consistent curve. And this is blade 2. So I'm just seeing whereabouts I want to cut. Okay. One side. And it lifted off the paper, that's not a huge issue. I'm just going to move this out the way so I don't cut that. Okay, and I just need to see where I'm cutting. Okay. And there we go. Now that you've got your cuts, what you can do is you can go in and very gently clean with your blade if you need to, but more often than not the cutter does a pretty good job. So there you can see what a nice clean job that does. There's just this one section here, but right, so that's pretty much our shape. What we're going to do is I'm just going to put this to the side, and I am going to see if I can get another one out of this quickly. Okay, so there's another one. Put this to the side. Don't screw up these scraps. We can easily separate out these colours so that there's very little waste. So don't be going and throwing those out or anything like that. Okay, now I'm just going to lift that up off the tile, and then just gently smooth your hand along the edge just to get rid of any little bits and pieces that might be hanging on. Like so. You can see that's a different shape than the last one, which is fine. Okay, and there we go, you can see our two shapes here. I'm just going to pick those up, flip this over. I'm going to run my finger along this one as well, just to smooth out any fuzzy edges. Okay, and there we go, you can see how those look. They look quite pretty. So, now the next step is going to be to create our backing. So before we do that, I want to bring over our scrap quickly, because there is a bit of scrap here and it would be a pity to waste it. So that one already is pretty good. And I didn't burnish them together too well, so if you're lucky, you should be able to pull the pieces apart. If you're unable to pull them apart, you can always use a a tissue blade to cut them out. Oops, I'm putting that in the wrong part. But there you can see you're basically not going to end up with any waste. And I keep putting it in the wrong pile, I do apologize. So just do that with all of your scrap so that you don't end up with any waste. And then after that we're going to assemble the back for our pendants. Okay, and our back is going to be a piece of bronze, polymer clay, and this one I have rolled out to 1mm thick, which is on the 6th setting of my pasta machine. Now what we're going to do is I'm actually going to put on a different piece of paper. There we go. Let me just get this hair off of here. Cat hair gets in absolutely everything. There we go. And that's why burnishing is so important, because it gets rid of any little divots that you might have. So just burnish that down and it will give it a nice smooth texture on the back. Okay. Then bring over your pieces and do them separately. You don't want to put them both on at the same time. Very gently press them down. We've got a texture here, so don't press too hard. And this time I'm going to be using my tissue blade so that I get a very nice clean cut. And because I've already got the curves, it shouldn't give me any trouble. And I can just follow those curves. So I'll just put that to the side. We'll use that for the other one. The main point of that other cutter is so that you get nice, clean, consistent curves every single time, and it will just make your piece look more consistent. Whereas with this flexible blade, it can be very difficult to get the same curve every single time. Okay, there we go. Now what I want you to do is check around the edges to make sure that that's nice and clean and that the two are joined together properly. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I will leave that on that piece of paper for the moment. And I will bring over the other one. And I want to again burnish this onto the piece of paper so that it's stuck down well. And then I'll repeat what I basically did with the other one. I will cut out the backing once this is on. Okay, and there we go. So those are basically the base of the pendants. Now I want to bake these before we move to add our bail and any little extra bits and pieces to the piece. Mainly because once it's baked, and if you accidentally mess up the bail, you can easily peel off the bail and it's not going to affect the shape of the piece. It also means that you won't get distortion, you won't get fingerprints. So bake your base, and then afterwards we're going to add our bail, any little embellishments, and I'll show you how to attach it to the back nicely. Also with the bail, you want the back to be the same colour as the bail, rather than here where it is a slightly different, or quite a different colour, because then the bail will blend in much nicer. So that's something to keep in mind when you are making your piece, because you can make this in any colour you want. So bake this for about 40 minutes at Primo's recommended temperature. If you're using a different brand, bake it at that brand's recommended temperature, and then we can move on to embellishing it. Okay, so our pieces are out of the oven and they have finished cooling, and you can see how this one looks now. And the other one I actually have already put my design together, so let me bring that over and show you what we are basically going to do to this one. So here you can see how that looks. You've got a very nice little bail there and a little embellishment, and you can see here on the back how we line it up with the side of the piece. So that is basically what we're going to do. So I could put that to the side so that we don't bump it by accident. And we're going to start working with this one. So what you want to do first is you want to roll out a piece of bronze primer to about 2mm thick, I'd say. This is my third setting on my pasta machine, same as these sheets that we started out with. Then you're going to want a texture of your choice. Preferably for this you want to be having a long stripe-like texture. So for this one I didn't use the same texture as here, this is the older one. But basically you want a long line-like texture. So what I'm using here is my abstract acrylic roller texture. just going to choose the section that I like the best. So I like there the best. And I'm going to try and keep this line here somewhat the center. So I'm trying not to get my head in the way here while I do this. Okay. And then also, while we're at it, I'm going to bring over my second smallest mini circle cutter, and I'm just going to, let's see, I think I'll cut it out over here. Just cut out a circle as well. Okay, so you can get that out of the way. And the nice thing is, because we're working with solid colours, it means that if you do happen to mess up anything of any sort at any point now, you can just put it through a pasta machine and try again. I'm just busy getting rid of any spindly bits around the edge. Pop that to the side, we'll work with that in a minute. It's the bail that we want to be working on right now. Trim this edge up here, and this one down here as well, just to clean it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start by curling it. So that we can get that shape. Okay. Then once I've got a rough shape there, now I'm going to bring over a tiny bit of translucent liquid clay, and I'm using Sculpey liquid clay, and I'm just going to brush that, a little bit of it anyway, along the entire length of this copper that we have, oh not copper, bronze sheet of clay, so that it will stick to our piece. Now don't pour on too much, you don't want this to be slippery, you just want it to have a light sticky surface. Okay, we'll just quickly get rid of that liquid clay, we don't want that hanging around. Now we're going to put the spiral on first. So, okay, and I'm just going to manage that and put it in the position that I want it to be in. So you can just move it around. You've got the liquid clay on, but you only, once you get it in the right place, you can just very gently tap, and then it should stick in place. And if at any point you're unhappy with it, you can always just take it off and try again. Then I'm busy sticking the back on as well, because I've folded over my bail. And just press very lightly. We have a texture here, so we don't want to be pressing too hard. You just want to carry on pressing so that the liquid clay sticks. Okay. And even once you've got the liquid clay on there and you've stuck it down, you can still fuss with the piece a bit. You just don't want to be handling it too much. Okay, then I'm just going to cut this because it's coming down a little far for my liking. And then I'm going to actually use my circle cutter here, the same one that we used before, to take a nick out of this. And I just like that because I think it finishes a bit better. Okay, then just pop that to the side, and then very lastly I'm just going to grab a touch more liquid clay on my finger here, and I'm going to brush that onto the bottom of this little circle piece that we have. Bring that over and position that the way you want it. And then you can fuss with it, and basically you can continue messing with this as much as you want until you are happy with the result. I'm just using my blade here just to curl that tip in a touch more. But basically I'm happy with it. But you don't have to bake it until you are happy with it. You can fuss with it as long as you want. And then when you're done, pop it onto a piece of plain printing paper, like so. And then we can pop it into the oven. Now I might just move this up just a touch. Just wanted to move that a touch. Alright, and then pop that into the oven for about, I'd say 40 minutes at your brand's recommended temperature, so primo in this case. And then when we're done, we are going to move on to doing a touch of sanding. We don't actually need to do a lot because we've been finishing this off pretty well. And any other little bits and pieces we need to do before we assemble. Okay, and so here they are out of the oven. And I'm really happy with how they look. Now, at this point, you could leave them the way they are. If your sides are nice and smooth and you don't have any little bits and pieces hanging off that need to be sanded off, then you don't need to do sanding. Like in this case, if you look around the piece, there really isn't anywhere that we have to sand. Because the top part we don't really want to sand because it's got texture, and the back because we burnished it on a piece of clay, it's nice and smooth, so we don't have to do anything with that. So at this point you could leave it the way it is. Now the next few steps that I'm going to be going through are completely optional. What we're going to be doing is I'm going to be putting some little resin drops onto one of these pieces, and you can see here how that looks. So that's completely optional. If you don't want to do that, that's perfectly fine. Another thing I'm going to do after the resin drops have cured is I'm going to use some Renaissance wax to very lightly give this a little bit more of a sheen. Again, completely optional because there's nothing to seal in over here. So this one I'm going to leave as is because I really like how it is. This one we're going to put some resin drops on. So I'm going to bring this over and I'm just going to pop the bale over the side so that it's lying nice and flat. And I'm going to open up this UV resin. This is Magic Gloss UV resin. Now, nice thing about the Magic Gloss is it's got quite a nice high doming capacity. And so when we use a little ball tool to put down little drops, they should stay in drops. Now I've got some resin around the lid here and I'm going to just use that. Because you really do not need a huge amount of resin. And use different size ball tool heads to get different size droplets. And when I'm done with that, I will put it into my UV light for about 15 minutes just to make sure that it is completely cured, and then we can move on to adding in some of our Renaissance wax just to give it a nice light sheen. And now as far as the drops go, I am only going to be adding them to this base part. I am not going to be adding them to my bale. You can add them to the bale, completely up to you. I'm just telling you what I'm going to be doing. Okay, now in the meantime, while that is in the UV light, we're going to apply some Renaissance wax to this. So I've just got a little bit of wax on my fingertips. Just going to brush that over the surface. You don't want to have too much wax because you don't want it to clog up your texture. So try to get it in as much as you can. You do not need a lot for it to make a big difference. Just a little bit. The buffing wheel will do a lot of the work. Just make sure that you get a generous amount of wax on the surface. Then we can use our buffing wheel. Okay, now this makes a little bit of noise, so you might want to turn your sound down. Okay, and there we go. You can see how that has brought up a really nice sheen in the piece, and it's just brightened up a bit. So I'm going to put that to the side. The wax needs to dry for about 15 minutes, so that and the piece in the UV light, just let them sit for about 15 minutes, and then when they're done I will show you how they look. Okay, and here they are, all finished. So this one, once I took it out of the UV light, I buffed that up with some Renaissance wax. Now before you buff it up with the wax, due to the fact that you do have resin on there, you do need to leave it in the UV light for at least 15 minutes before you can buff it, because the buffing wheel, if the resin is not completely cured to a hard finish, it will kind of smudge the surface and it won't look very nice. So just make sure that those resin droplets are completely cured before you buff it. Now again, completely optional, but I do think that the buffing works really well, and also I really think that the teardrops add another little effect. Now bear in mind, you can use this design with any colours you want. You can also use any texture stamp you want. I prefer kind of string-like or ribbon-like textures. I think those work best, especially if the ribbon-like texture is done on the bail, so that you have this nice long effect. I'm having a little bit of trouble explaining myself, but if you have a look at this one, you can see that these stripes kind of follow the shape of the bail, which really adds to the effect. So that is why I tend to use ribbon-like textures. Other than that though, it's completely up to you how you want to do it. You can copy the exact design that I have on here, or you can play around with different colours, different textures, different shapes, completely up to you, so play around. So in all, I think that it has been improved on. I quite like it. This one seems a lot more bright, a lot more metallic as well, which is something that I quite like. And so yeah, now one more note quickly, if you want to learn how to create this kind of knotted cord here, I would highly recommend getting this book. Let me just bring up here, you can see here, this is the cord that I used, and let me just zoom out quickly. There we go. This is the book. I highly recommend checking it out. You can find it on eBay, Amazon, there's lots of places you can get, and there are a bunch of different knotting projects in there that you can try out. So definitely recommend this book if you want to learn how to create that knotted cord that I used on the piece here. So anyway, that's just about it for this tutorial. If you would like to support the channel so that I can continue creating videos like this one every single week, please do consider becoming a patron. I have a link to that in the description below. Another way to help out this channel is also to visit my Etsy shop and check out the tools and supplies that I sell on there. That also is extremely helpful. And leave a like, let me know in the comments below what you thought, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.